In recent years, we have become accustomed to the dark truth behind our once beloved TV icons being brought to the public's eye. From Ellen to Oprah, it doesn't seem like there's an end in sight, and as the extent of the exploitation behind the industry's facade has become much more apparent, many have found themselves in the position of having to ask the following question: what are we willing to do for good ratings? Dr. Phil is no exception. Like any shift in the court of public opinion, it was not just one event that led to the situation we find ourselves in today, but an array of issues and a pattern of behavior that led to so many viewers having to ask fundamental questions. In my last video, I went over some of the controversies that Phil McGraw's gotten into over the runtime of his infamous program, like his dubious money-making endeavors or his involvement with Turnabout Ranch. However, during my research, I stumbled upon much more shocking information that paints a larger, and more importantly, a much clearer picture about the extent of morally reprehensible or outright inhumane practices behind the show's crumbling masquerade, and how Dr. Phil's gotten away with it. Until now. In the final installment of the series, I'd like to take you on a comprehensive tour of the skeletons inside Dr. Phil's closet. From his willingness to push beyond what is generally considered to be morally acceptable in the favor of good ratings, his sheer lack of integrity, and a refusal to take accountability for any of his actions. There's a lot to talk about. So, without further ado, let's talk about the dark side of Dr. Phil.
A dozen current and former employees have come forward alleging toxic workplace behavior on the set of Dr. Phil.
A controversial promo was released that many felt was insensitive to Shelley's mental illness.
Workers say senior-level employees frequently verbally abused them on the set, and guests were mistreated on the show.
In another case, a young woman's family said producers actually told them to go to Skid Row to get heroin if necessary.
As for the style of the show and the way he's going about all of this, it doesn't feel right.
She's suffering from severe mental illness.
Who can touch him unless sponsors decide, I don't want to be associated with this thing? What happens to them?
Some who suffer from mental disorders are among the most vulnerable in our society, and they deserve our protection and our care. They deserve more than the Dr. Phil show.
The abuse of power dynamics is sadly a very prevalent issue of the entertainment industry. In the pursuit of justice, many people within the last few years have come forward about the mistreatment they were subjected to behind the scenes of popular productions. As a result of this, movements like MeToo have sprung up in an attempt to hold the perpetrators accountable while providing victims with resources, protection, and most importantly, a voice. A common problem in a lot of these cases is a lack of substantial evidence. Word of mouth, as trustworthy as it may be, usually fails to hold up in a court of law. A large part of the abuse isn't exactly easy to corroborate, as prosecutors are often forced to exclusively rely on witness testimonies alone. And even if the involved are being completely truthful, our memories are very, very flawed. And what one may see as a friendly interaction, the other may completely misinterpret. This isn't helped by the internet and tabloids inflating the accusations, which makes it harder to distinguish sensationalization from the actual claims and can lead to attention seekers or people with ulterior motives coming up with blatantly false stories that make it significantly harder for actual victims of abuse to come forward. These points serve to illustrate the following very well. Situations like these are often insanely complicated and have in many ways made it a gamble to go public, leading to many having to painstakingly put up with the misconduct in fear of losing their work, social alienation, or loss of any future job prospects, and can often ruin people's lives. Luckily, these obstacles didn't stop Leah Rothman. Leah had pursued a position as a director and segment producer of the Dr. Phil show for well over a decade until she suddenly decided to end her career in 2015 when she filed a lawsuit against Phil himself. The focus? Emotional distress and false imprisonment. Her claims called the show's reputation even further into question. She alleged that the toxic atmosphere went so far that it caused her to suffer from intense hair loss, detailing one event in particular in which Dr. Phil locked several hundreds of employees in a room for multiple hours, where he then proceeded to scream, insult, and make serious threats against the crying staffers because insider information had leaked to the press. Situations like these were apparently far too common on the set. However, this time around, the distressed employee had finally managed to collect evidence documenting the behavior. At the heart of the lawsuit was a video, made up of several different iPhone recordings and clips from the show's archive that substantiated Rothman's claims about the incident. McGraw's response, however, surprised many of the people that were keeping up with the court case. Instead of filing a lawsuit about libel or blackmail, as one usually would do in a situation like this, he decided to sue the director for copyright infringement. This is where the case started to fall apart. The judge argued that she couldn't use the tape because it had been illegally obtained, meaning it wasn't admissible, and even though other employees jumped to corroborate her testimony, the court case was lost because she was forced to rely on her word against full alone. In my coverage of the Todd Herzog situation, I criticized the show's lack of responsibility when it comes to enabling substance abuse. If you haven't seen that video, let me give you a quick rundown. A few years ago, the reality TV star Todd Herzog appeared on the Dr. Phil show due to his ongoing battle with alcoholism. During his first appearance, Herzog found several liters of vodka placed in his wardrobe by a staffer, which he, being an alcoholic, drank it down to the last drop. However, when employees got wind of this, he was given Xanax in an attempt to get him on stage, seriously endangering his life by doing so. According to several eyewitness accounts, Herzog was fully sober when he arrived. What's so interesting about this is that this was not an isolated incident, and when he reappeared sometime later, alcohol magically appeared in his wardrobe again, leading to many people suspecting ulterior motives, including me.
Dr. Phil has made a career of rescuing addicts on television. But a recent report by Stat at the Boston Globe paints a very different picture, claiming Phil McGraw's staff directs guests who are struggling with addiction to drugs and provides them with alcohol in an effort to add to the on-air drama.
That being said, when I started researching the incident, I was met with an array of eerily similar cases of the show perpetrating their guests' serious addictions in a variety of strange ways. Joelle King-Parrish brought her 28-year-old daughter Caitlin on the show in the hopes of helping her with the substance abuse problem that she was suffering from. However, during their 2-day stay in LA, she started experiencing severe withdrawal. Her mother, who is a nurse, decided to drive her to the closest hospital in the hopes of getting her treatment as soon as possible. But Caitlin left on her own 6 hours later to go back to the studio without having received any form of medication. This situation would have already been bad enough. Nonetheless, what I didn't mention is that Caitlin was 6 months pregnant while all of this transpired, which the show was fully aware of. It is especially important to note that going cold turkey in a situation like this without any kind of medical supervision could cause serious problems for her, as well as potentially kill the unborn child, which introduced a serious moral dilemma. Caitlin and her mother were either forced to go through heroin withdrawal and putting the life of a baby in danger, or giving in to her body's yearning, of which they chose the latter. But instead of helping her find medical supervision, the present staffers decided to record Caitlin walking around the metropole looking for a heroin dealer to use as B-roll for the show.
So I basically spent $280 in the last 10 hours trying to get drugs for Caitlin. The first batch wasn't any good, and now we're here and God knows where, she's trying to find drugs.
In one clip, a pregnant heroin addict is seen searching for a dealer on Skid Row in LA, a journey her mother says 3 of the show's staffers accompanied them on.
After being called out publicly for their questionable behavior, the program defended their actions by claiming that they were merely documenting what would have transpired regardless of their involvement. And look, I get it. This situation is already insanely complicated, and you could definitely make the argument that this may have been the only way to defuse it. However, this does beg the following question. Why was she not under medical supervision? They were fully aware of the struggles, but chose to do less than the bare minimum. This is a well-established show that has been running for over 2 decades, and it's not like this was their first time handling a situation like this. Addiction is a recurring topic on the program. How did they not have any professionals on set? Was it pure carelessness or a sheer lack of competence? I genuinely do not know which one is worse. What we can safely assume is the following though. This shouldn't have happened. This could have seriously harmed her and her unborn child, and should have been in medical care as soon as she arrived in Los Angeles. Denationalization of Medicare has been a big debate in the American political space for several decades now, and for good reason. Many people struggle to afford treatment for their often life-threatening illnesses, leading for many Americans to call for change in the system. However, today we aren't here to talk about the USA's medical framework, but more so of its results. This is where Dr. Phil comes in. Even though a notable portion of episodes have been revealed to be staged, this unfortunately isn't always the case. Many guests appear on the show not due to the publicity or in favor of monetary gains, but because it's the only means of getting access to help for them or their loved ones. Programs like the Dr. Phil Show promise guests medical care in exchange for privacy, a risky trade. Before I show you the following clip, I feel the need to add some context. This guest's name is Jake, and claims to have a video game addiction that has led to him to skip school and engage in violent altercations with family members.
We will be flying out of the airport to go to the Dr. Phil show.
You enjoy your time in LA?
So you'll most likely not be willing to go.
Correct.
And that means if I try to get you to go in the car, what happened?
Well, remember what Dad tried to get me in the car? He couldn't even get me in the car. I doubt you can as well.
Despite the fact that he very clearly suffers from some sort of mental health issue, he refuses to go on the show and wants to seek different kinds of help instead.
Personally, I think I can solve the problem myself. I don't think I need to be on the Dr. Phil show, and I feel that this is a waste of my time. So I'm not going.
Due to the context surrounding his appearance, most people believe he was in his own right to deny the publication of his own personal life, as it is his choice to decide whether or not he wants his dirty laundry displayed on national television. And I don't know about you, but this doesn't scream voluntary to me. Jake eventually appeared on the show, clearly after being pressured by a handler sent by Dr. Phil, seemingly to strong-arm him into agreeing to be on the program.
When that happens and parents agree, then we involve what's called a transporter.
We've just arrived at the family home. We're going to go inside and meet our young man.
What would have happened if a guest didn't comply with McGraw's unreasonable demands? This leads us to the disturbing case of Shelley Duvall.
Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall. Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall. Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall. Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall. Hello, I'm Shelley Duvall.
Shelley Duvall was an actress who had decided to live a life off-camera after fleeing Hollywood in the 1990s. Information surrounding the reason for her retreat into isolation is hard to come across. However, it is worthy to note that the most widely regarded explanation is that her work on the set of the horror classic The Shining deeply traumatized the actress and sent her spiraling down a rabbit hole that ultimately led to her departure from the film industry in spite of a promising career. This is a subject with many loose ends, so I don't feel fully comfortable with the idea of delving into them in this video. However, I added some articles into the description that other people have made regarding the reason for Shelley's decline in mental stability. Barely anything was known about Duvall, and it is to no surprise that audiences were theorizing what had happened to the performer even for many years after she had retired. How can somebody go from starring one of the most critically acclaimed films of all time, working with people such as the late Robin Williams and winning countless awards for work on passion projects, to completely cutting themselves off from the public's view? Well, these questions and more were all hopefully going to be answered when the Dr. Phil show announced their 1 hour-long special with Shelley Duvall.
Friday on an all-new Dr. Phil. The Shining's Shelley Duvall, from red carpet to near recluse.
I loved Robin Williams. I don't think he's dead.
Where do you think he is?
Shape-shifting.
Do you see him?
Has, yes.
A star's descent into mental illness.
The man who's threatening me is the sheriff of Nottingham. I think there's a worrying disc inside me. I'm very sick. I need help.
Well, that's why I'm here.
That's Friday.
She had agreed to appear on the show after an executive had managed to contact her in 2016. Unbeknownst to what was to follow, she agreed. It isn't uncommon for reality TV shows to try and bring on actors or other celebrities, but many felt like this was different. This interview serves as a shocking display of untreated mental illness, and is genuinely heartbreaking to watch. But what is arguably more disturbing is that McGraw is entertaining her delusion in what feels like a modern-day freak show.
Who are you?
stop the heavy leg thing or I'm going to walk out.
Okay. Tell them to stop what?
The heavy hip thing.
Okay.
Tell them to turn it off at the front desk.
Okay.
Right now, Cameron.
All right. Sarah, will you tell them to turn it off?
Yes.
Okay, great.
This episode received heavy backlash. Many felt like the production was taking advantage of a mentally ill woman in the favor of good ratings. Even Stanley Kubrick's daughter, Vivian, voiced her discontent with the segment on a Twitter.
So she put out a statement saying, "You are putting Shelley Duvall on show while she is suffering from a pitiable state of health. Unquestionably, this is purely a form of exploitive entertainment. I recoil in complete disgust. I hope others will join me in boycotting your utterly heartless form of entertainment because it has nothing to do with compassionate healing."
How did nobody raise concerns during the creation? This wasn't live, but planned months in advance, and multiple people worked on its production. This woman was unable to consent to appear, let alone be broadcasted to millions of people.
Can't imagine that cameras, lights, and Dr. Phil is helpful. It seemed like Dr. Phil was baiting her to say crazy-sounding things.
It's almost impossible to find clips of the episode online now, as they've tried their best efforts to remove discussion about this from the limelight, effectively negating much of the potential lashback. If you were to play devil's advocate, the argument could be made that if this leads to Duvall being able to finally get help with her problems, the ends would have justified the means. However, the solutions from the program didn't work. In fact, most treatment centers struggle to provide proper medical care, in contrast to what is described on the show.
I want to have you checked out by some really good doctors.
I would like that.
For free. I'll pay for
If you
it.
promise me that they won't murder me.
I promise you.
Dr. Phil later took Shelley to a mental facility in Southern California, but she refused to sign the papers or take any meds, so after 3 days, she was sent back home.
We're now working directly with Shelley's mother and are providing Shelley treatment from a group of local professionals who, due to her refusal to take medication, will use alternative methods to treat her.
In spite of this shocking appearance, Shelley Duvall thankfully ended up finding help with her condition and has been doing a lot better for a while now. This not because of Dr. Phil though.
"I found out the kind of person he is the hard way," Duvall said in the interview. "My mother didn't like him either. A lot of people, like Dan Gilroy, her partner, said, 'You shouldn't have done that, Shelley.'"
So, to conclude this video series for now, I want you to take a look at some of the stuff we have gone over so far. Dr. Phil has denied any involvement with Turnabout Ranch, even after being informed of his wrongdoings, and continues to promote them on his website, refused having any part in the stories of Todd Herzog or Joelle King-Parrish, and flat out ignored the rest, and it's unlikely that that's gonna change anytime soon. I'm not surprised that they have chosen to not admit to any of their misbehavior, as it would be a PR disaster. However, I feel like that this is the core of the issue. Dr. Phil and his show is a relic of the past, but he's not the only one that this description applies to. As audiences have become more critical and knowledgeable of the materials that they consume, programs like this can no longer get away with shady business practices like they used to, but are forced to confront the reality that honesty, and a lack thereof, is what creates and destroys careers. I feel like what's most important though is obvious. They need to take accountability for their actions, and ignoring all of the mistakes isn't gonna make them disappear, but only lead to more people being made aware of them. This will not be the be-all end-all video regarding Dr. Phil, and unless they plan to make drastic changes to their format, situations like these will keep on transpiring. This is Jakontrary, signing off.
While our hearts swinging to violin, singing till dawn. Lady dressed in jade, hold me tight at the masquerade. If the music halts, dear, then my heart will waltz here right on.